Hey folks, welcome back to High Conflict Divorce Demystified. Today we're talking about tender talks guiding children through divorce amid conflict. And it's particularly important as we focus on the delicate task of communicating with children about divorce, especially when they've been living in an environment filled with conflict. We understand that this conversation can be one of the most challenging aspects of divorce, and we're here to offer you guidance and support to help you through it. I am honored to have Dr. David S. Marcus, a Ph.D., joining us today. Dr. Marcus will share his expertise, and he has a lot of it, on parent-child communication about divorce and the potential consequences it has on the children. He'll also discuss what parents should avoid when talking to their children about their ex and their ex's family, as well as the critical role of the soothing presence, as he puts it, in a child's life. Before we dive in a little bit about Dr. Marcus, he has extensive experience and commitment to improving the lives of individuals and families. And it has made him a highly respected figure in the field of clinical psychology, with over 40 years of experience in treating families under stress. He's a sought-after clinical and legal resource in the Cincinnati area. He was just telling me that he was a custody evaluator for many years, testified in court, and has an enormous amount of respect within the court system, particularly on the topics of parent-child communication and advocacy is his specialty. His deep understanding and compassionate approach have helped countless families navigate the difficult terrain of divorce and conflict, and he is here today to support you. Welcome, Dr. Marcus.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I am just delighted. You have such a depth and breadth of experience. And as I said in the intro, this is for so many, it's the kids that is the most tender and scary part of going through this process when it's high conflict.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
So
So
can we start? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so let's dive in and just talk about, there are so many conversations. I had a specialist on that talked about telling the kids. So we're not really going to focus on telling the kids about that initial conversation, but there
Mm-hmm.
are so many other conversations. And number one, parents sometimes don't have them when they need to be had. And then I would say that all of us are probably far from our best self when going through the thick of a high conflict divorce. And so with all of that
Yes.
emotional reactivity, and I think that the other thing I would say is uh, even the best parents out there, I think would say they secretly want the child to side with them. Like there's just this understand me, see me part. So let's just open it up with some basics here. For our audience, they have children, maybe infants, maybe up to young adults, and they're going through divorce. Can we start with some basic do's and don'ts when having conversations around the divorce and the other parent?
That will depend on the age of the child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Obviously, you're not going to have a conversation like that with a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old,
Right.
you know. But what parents need to be aware of initially, and this is true, period, is that children are exquisitely aware of how their parents feel. You can pick up an infant, and if you're tense, they'll cry, you know. So parents try to hide things from their children, and they don't succeed. The child knows if you're upset. Now, young children below the age of maybe 4 or 5, all right, actually up to the age of 7, their aim is to please their parents. Okay, they want their parents to smile at them. It's all part of self-esteem, which is a whole topic on itself. And but they need their parents' positive regard. Right. The difficulty comes in is that they need it from both parents, and if the parents are fighting, the child is stuck in a situation. It's called a divided loyalty situation. My guess is you're familiar with the term, where if they say, hey, I had a really good time with daddy, they see mommy gets upset.
Yeah.
And it becomes unsafe for the child to share that material. Now, young children are not geared to keep secrets. And yet, so many of the parents turn to their child, the young children, and say, well, don't tell daddy this and don't tell mommy that. Well, that's very difficult for a child. It puts them in the situation of having to take care of their parents rather than their parents taking care of them.
Mm.
And they're not geared to that. And they develop symptoms. Okay. Can vary, again, it varies with age. Very young children will just sense the tension in the house and they'll be difficult. They'll be crying a lot. They don't know what to do. All right. And they need a soothing presence. And a soothing presence at that age is basically holding them and saying, I'm okay. This is something I stress with parents all the time. Let your children know that you are okay, because that's what they're afraid of, that you're not okay. And they need you to be to make them okay.
Right.
Like I said, they're connected so exquisitely. All right. That's where the soothing presence come in. Now, with an infant, you soothe them by holding them. With a 4-year-old, it begins with language. But at 4, children are aware that they're stressed, but they don't understand how come. And they often can blame themselves because parents are arguing about parenting. And I see a lot of children, a little older than that, who have taken on the role of the pleaser or the placater. And that's a lifetime role sometimes. I saw a young man I saw when he was 10 who was still playing that role, a high maintenance woman. And we had to point out that he's repeating the role that he did when he was young to keep
I
his
think
parents okay.
I think most of us who are listening right now would be nodding our head saying, yeah, my codependence started in my childhood with my high conflict family
Yeah.
and that coping mechanism landed me in my high conflict marriage.
You know, it's amazing what we call chemistry. Chemistry is basically what you're used to. And if you're used to, oh yeah, this person is pushing me around, but that's okay, then you're attracted to that person. But in the long run, the arrogance comes out, especially if we're talking about a narcissistic parent, for instance. They want to focus on them. And as soon as mom, let's say the dad is the narcissist, as soon as mom has a child, they're no longer feeding the narcissist because now they're a mother. And that's typically when things go awry
Yep.
in a family where there's a narcissistic father, let's say.
I would say across the board, my clients, when I ask when did it start to unravel, it's when the babies came, when I
That's
could
right.
not, focus all my attention on him or her. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So I want to go back to this because I
Yeah.
jumped in, but you're saying at 4 years old, they're going to start
Mhm.
caretaking their parents.
They are aware that something's wrong, but they don't know that it's really a parent conflict and they think it's their fault. And they can take this role as the pleaser or the placater.
Right.
Now, then, when they get a little older, like at 7 or 8, they begin to realize, hey, this is really bugging me. And hopefully, they have developed what's called an emotional language to be able to express it.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, that is a skill. I mean, maybe in another time when we speak, if there is, we can talk about how to develop a common emotional language with your child. Okay. Because this is key in helping children who are going through high conflict situations. I don't know how much you want me to get into that, but it is very key. Parents make assumptions about the language about their children. They assume that the word anger is the same to them as it is to their child. And they're
I think we
wrong.
should talk about this for a few minutes. I think this is actually very important. And look, I'm going to say to
Mhm.
the audience right now, I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I want us all to trust that it's going to go exactly where it needs to go. So
Okay.
let's look at that.
This is a key element in the things that I talk about in the book I'm trying to publish, etc., because parents make assumptions about their children's emotionality. Okay. And I'll read these off to you as a beginning of this part of the conversation. They make 4 assumptions based on the child's development. The earliest assumption is my child experiences their emotions. Now, that's a fairly safe one to say. Children know when they're angry, when they're sad, when they're mad. That's a good thing because if this assumption wasn't true, if they didn't experience their emotions, that only happens in cases of severe neglect or abuse. And who I'm describing to you is Hannibal the cannibal.
Right.
Somebody who can do horrific things and feel nothing.
Right.
Any parent that comes to see me in private practice, that's not going to be the problem, right?
Right.
But the next one up is the next assumption based, developmentally. Okay, the child has their emotions. Can they tolerate their emotions?
Oh,
Okay, now, if you have had children, you realize when they're young, they experience emotions very intensely.
yeah. And
They're,
quickly, right? They're like
oh,
screaming and crying one
like,
minute, they're playing with their dolls the next.
well, that gets into the love-hate part of things, okay? But let's stick to this right now, all right? Because there's very little difference between love and hate. Maybe you are aware of that. You want me to go into that too? I mean, I don't know. How far afield do you want to
No,
go
no,
here,
no, no.
Karen?
Let's stay on this though.
Okay. They,
They
ass they assume that the assumption is my child can tolerate their intense emotions. That's a big maybe.
okay.
I've had children in here. If I ask them a certain question, they'll cover their ears because they can't tolerate it. Okay, because a child doesn't have the language to express it yet. That's the next assumption. My child has the emotional language to express it to me, but at this level, they don't have it, so they act out on it behaviorally. And the other thing they don't have is what I call the gray zone. They don't have, like we do as adults, experience that say, well, this was worse than this, but better than that. And this is how I handled it before, but now I don't,
they don't
they
have
don't
it.
have it. They don't have it. So they experience these things intensely. This is one of the reasons for play therapy, because that's in the third person. It's a lot easier for a child to say, well, in this picture, blah, blah, blah is going on, or the dollhouse or the drawing, because then they're talking about somebody else.
Right.
So it's not as intense. Oftentimes they'll say, well, that's what happens to me when they finally get into it. But they have to do it this way.
Yeah.
And so the therapist or the parent has to find the right media to communicate with their child at different ages. See? You follow me?
So I want to just kind of pause and summarize a little bit. So if you have a child under the age of 5 or 6,
Mm-hmm.
then uh, they're most likely experiencing their emotions may be more than they can handle. They may not be able to communicate it using play therapy of one type or another. I used to do that. I used to get books for my kids, and so we could talk about the characters in the book as
Sure.
opposed to what they were dealing with mommy and daddy. It was the
Same
dinosaurs
difference.
and what was going on with the dinosaurs. Yeah.
Same thing.
So if you have young children, I think there's a couple of things. One thing I hear so often is we never fight in front of them. They don't know. And I'm like, they know. And I hear you saying they absolutely know. They
They
have such
absolutely know.
receptors. They're so keyed into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been living in a conflict-ridden or high conflict household, I think what Dr. Marcus is saying is regardless of what you think your child is experiencing it, they're having emotions. And the other thing I think I heard you say is if your child is acting out, that is an outcome of all of this input that they're receiving. And
Mm-hmm.
since they can't articulate it, it's coming out in behavior.
Right. But,
Beautiful.
yeah, it's exactly right, Karen. And that is, uh, how do you develop the emotional language is a topic in itself because it has to be the common language. And what I mean by that is that it has to be based on the child's experience, not on the parents.
We had part of this conversation offline the last time we spoke. So let's delve into that for a few minutes.
Okay.
What common language and how you pull out of your child
Sure.
what the words are that they would use.
Exactly. Um, Parents make the assumption, like I just mentioned before, that, oh, I went through this too, and this is what I felt, and this is what I did. And their intention is good, but they're making an error because the child is still filled up with this intense emotion. And them just saying, hey, I did it, it's not going to make the child feel any different.
Right.
All right. Plus, even if you're dead on right,
Right.
you're wrong because the child needs to be able to express it from in here to out here,
How do you
where
do
you
that?
can be. That's what I'm getting at. Okay. Developing a common emotional language. What I do with children is we talk about what's important to them and they come up with these experiences that are important to them. And I'll say, okay, like with little children, I'll use my hands and say, I'll point to like a face, and it's an angry face or something, and a sad face. And it's typical things that we do with very young children. Point to the face that it is. Show me with your hands how much it is. Is it just a little angry or this angry or this angry? What amazes me is children can touch their hands behind their back. It would break my backbone to do that. You know what I mean? But they can do it. And I say, is there a word for it? And I've come up with some great ones. One boy who was about 7, he said, it makes me volcano mad, you know? And then we compared it to something. What's one that's a little spot? Well, when my mom makes me eat my peas.
Right, right.
So he tell me about things in the future, and I use it as a referent and say, was that volcano mad or eat your peas mad? But it has to be based on the child's experience because
Love
that's what
that.
has meaning to the child,
Right,
you
right.
know?
And this is up to the age of, let's just make sure we're giving some context here.
Okay, I've done this. Well, you see, everything's a blur. If the child, we need to start developing these things early on, and we can do that if the child doesn't have the words by doing what I just said, or by parents taking certain guesses with their children. My guess is it was tough, is one I use a lot. Children understand the word tough often. Tough, sad, tough, mad, tough, scary. You see what I mean?
Mm.
Scary. Okay. Give me a word for that.
Right.
And
And then
then,
measure it. I love that. Use your
yeah,
hands, measure how
yeah.
big is it. And if
Well,
they
with
touch their hands behind their back.
yeah, it's pretty bad. The with older children, I'll use a scale of 1 to 10.
Mhm.
Okay, how bad was that? You know, oh, that was, it made me anxious to a 9, Dr. Marcus. Okay, how can we lower it down to a 6? We can use that later on in treatment,
Right,
but
right.
they have to be able to tell me, and that's where we go to the very last assumption. Okay, the child experiences their emotions. They can tolerate their emotions with the help of the parents by what I'm just telling you, by developing assumption 3 that they have a language to develop that language. And the last one, which is big in high conflict, here we go. This is getting to the point. Is it safe for me to express these things to this parent? In other words, they can have their emotions, they can tolerate their emotions, they even have the language to express it, but I can't tell mommy I had a good time with daddy. I can't tell daddy that mommy's got a boyfriend. I can't, and children are not geared for this. And it puts a wall between them and their parents, and the child is left to their own. They have nobody to turn to. So the very people who are supposed to be soothing them through this by helping to express it and saying, yes, I'm here for you, are the people that are causing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to talk about that. I actually got a little teary-eyed. My daughter was either in the first or second grade. My ex-husband has a lot of anger, always had a lot of anger. And
Mm-hmm.
she went to her banana splits teacher, right? The social worker in the school.
Okay.
And she said, I just want more lovin's from my daddy. And so she created this whole 4 talking point thing and she practiced it with her. And my daughter had like long curly hair down to her butt and freckles and cute as a button. And here this therapist at this social worker is thinking, this is going to be a home run. And she goes home and she tells Daddy, I really just want some lovin's. And what happened to that child was devastating. He heard his wounded ego heard, you don't love me, you don't show me any love, you're not valuable to me. Like whatever he heard, he went ballistic on her. And I know that
It's a
that
shame.
was a point at which, right. So in terms of safety, um, it had such a debilitating impact on
Yes.
and I think the other thing I would say, she was so confused, right? I think that
Yeah.
she had gotten so much encouragement and she was like, I could do this. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example. And then the social worker felt terrible that she set her up that way. She just never imagined that a parent would have that kind of a reaction.
No. Well, not to disparage the social worker, but I'm telling you, in 40 years of practice, I never see a child without seeing their parents. Never. Because the child is simply showing symptoms of the family problems.
So you
Okay.
need to figure out what's going on with the parents to see what's safe
I
and
prepare the parents.
gotcha.
Okay. If I've, you know, when parents don't communicate in these situations, so they start making assumptions about one another, always in the negative. Oh,
Yeah.
here she goes again. Here he goes again. Right, just like what happened with you and your ex. And they react. You
Yeah.
know, and where they react from, which is something I talk to parents about in preparation for this, is where they regress to when they get stressed.
Yeah.
Your ex regresses to defensiveness and anger.
Yeah.
Others might regress to I'm shutting up. I don't want to get into this.
Right.
Or they may regress to optimism. Oh, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it, kid. That type of thing. It all depends. A lot of it depends on how they were brought up themselves, of course, because how we react to stress, this is something you may already be aware of, but how one of the things that is internalized, taken in almost on a subconscious level, is how we react to stress. You can see it passed on from generation to generation. This is why parents, children who are abused can often become abusive parents.
Right.
They'll swear up and down and sideways they'll never do what happened to them, to their own kids, but it's in there. And when they regress, they do it. And that's how these things get passed on.
So this is an interesting thing. I love the direction the conversation is going in because now I'm thinking at the end of the day, if we say goodbye and feel like we've discussed how to instill a sense of safety between you and your child, regardless of what's happening with the other parent. So
Mm-hmm.
we just talked about the fourth thing. Is it safe to articulate my emotional language, right?
Exactly.
So let's go
Mm-hmm.
back on that track because my sense is you probably have a lot of experience in um, how does a parent, even the non-high conflict parent, is triggered, reactive, scared,
Mm-hmm.
not their best self. And so from that place, you've got the pressure of the divorce, you've got the pressure of the ex who's undoubtedly pressuring you, the soon to be ex, you've got the pressure of life, and then you've got the pressure of all of your triggers and emotional reactiveness.
Mm-hmm.
How in that paradigm does one begin to create safety between them and their children?
Okay. You hit the nail on the head. Okay. And what I mean by this is one of the reasons I don't see children without seeing their parents. Parents have to become aware where they regress to, for instance. They're under a lot of stress, just like you said, and they cause each other stress, which is reflected in their children. How do you communicate with your ex without creating stress, which is going to translate to your relationship with your kids? Okay. Now that's a skill, that needs to be learned, right? How do you communicate? And what I tell parents, which may be surprising to you, and I have to explain this a little bit. I mentioned earlier love-hate relationships. You know, maybe you're aware of this, but it fits into what you're asking me here. People have a misconception about love and hate. If they had a whole scale of emotions, love would be on this pole, hate would be here. And actually, love and hate are very closely related emotions. You see this in little kids, just like we said. One minute they could be intensely gleeful about the little toy that you bought them, and then 5 minutes later, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. There's a simple explanation for this. You can't hate somebody that you don't care about.
So really an apathy is the opposite of love and hate.
You got it. What I tell parents who are divorcing, well, your goal is to reach a state of indifference.
Amen.
You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
The other person's there. You can be civil, whatever it is, but you're indifferent. That emotional bond is broken, and don't go there. Don't get sucked into the emotional conversation. I call it my own term, a benign boundary.
Yeah.
You're not being mean and saying, get out of my face. You're saying, I hear you. I understand. I may see it differently,
Yeah.
you know? Uh, or I choose not to talk about that. That's not our relationship anymore. We are co parents. That's it, you know? That needs to be established because sometimes, like when the narcissistic parent, oh, and they're not going to accept that. They still want the feeding, and so they're going to
So
push it.
yeah, and it's the responsibility of the other parent to be able to hold their boundary
Yeah,
and
exactly.
not step on that slippery slope into the.
It's so easy to be sucked back into it,
Yep.
So that's why I talk about the boundary, the boundary, the boundary.
Transform your relationships by mastering the art of boundaries without controlling or needing their approval. Visit jbddivorcesupport.com/boundary bootcamp to get started today. You've heard the saying, April showers bring May flowers. If co-parenting has been difficult this year due to your ex's alcohol abuse, you need SoberLink. How it works is simple. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times, built-in facial recognition will confirm their identity, Tampa sensors will flag any attempts to cheat, and results will get sent instantly to your phone, so you know that your kids are with a sober parent. Lay the groundwork for brighter days ahead. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device. So I want to go back to this be safe piece. There's a couple of things that have come up recently. So children of different ages. I just recently, in the last few days, got an email from somebody post-divorce, let's say divorced a narcissist, a teenage son now behaving a lot like dad, showing a lot of hostility and anger toward mom. I don't know anything else. I don't know these people, so I can't give you any more input. But that is a theme that I have heard over and over again. In fact, in my not schooled experience like you, I think that teenagers in general are very self-focused, so they have a little bit more narcissism in their system when they're going through teenage years. And then if you're
self-involved, yes.
Yeah, and then if you're divorcing someone who is on the spectrum, the fear is my child is becoming like my ex. And then of course, if you're regressing into reactivity, right? So can you just speak to that situation and what parents might do if they're dealing with that hostile belittling from their child now?
Okay. The question has a developmental bend. Okay, and I'll share that with you. Typically, if you're dealing with a teenager who's at that point, it began a lot earlier. Okay. At 15 or 16, yeah, most of the reaction is, I don't want any part of this.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's your problem. Leave me out of it. You're a pain in the neck. You're not really giving me what I need, which is individuation. You know what I mean? Because you're too busy with each other. And so they're mad about that. Yeah. Right? Because their job is to become independent and, be a self-directed adult between 13 and 19, and you're not helping by not being there for me in the way I need you to be there. But when you're talking about, which is pretty much parent alienation syndrome is what you're getting at, starts earlier. As I said earlier, children, below the tweens are geared to please their parents. And if a parent's saying, you're not going to do this, your mom's this, your dad's that, the child is not geared to say, but I love my mom, but I love my dad. Because I know if they say that, they're going to get rid of the riot act, right? They take it in. They have to take a side. That's the term divided loyalty at that point. They are divided. They have to love one parent and be against the other. And that's what you're seeing. And I'm telling you the truth, when I was doing this very difficult reintegration therapy, if I was already dealing with a teenager, it was very, very difficult because you've got a years-long history of being alienated from the other parent. Okay. If it's earlier on, if it's like 6 or 7, I've got a better shot.
Right.
because then I can talk to the parents and say, this is what's happening. And your child needs to love both of you. And you're taking it out on your child. Now we need to work on how you communicate, reach a state of indifference with one another, you know, settle the whole divorce thing and start getting what I call a safe emotional distance from one another. You know, that takes some doing. You may need some treatment yourself to do it, you know. And so I sometimes see parents individually to help them deal with their aggressions, to help them deal with the fact that this is what their child is actually saying. Okay, when I sit down with a child, I've got a keyboard in my lap. You know, it's a wireless keyboard, very quiet, so I can keep eye contact. And I'm taking verbatim in these situations what the child is saying. This is what your child is saying. See, parents may fight and fight, but they're in your office because they both want something for their kid. That's a typical thing. They want to be a good parent, whether it be for legal reasons or just to be a good parent, you know?
Right, right.
And so that's the focus and say, this is what your child is saying. What do you make of what he's saying? This is a picture that your child drew of you being used and then being small with very big eyes. They're being hyper vigilant. They're saying, I have to keep an eye because my parents are unpredictable. And predictability, share with you, which is, I'm sure you're aware of this, is the basis of trust. It's the basis of security in young children. It's the basic building block of any emotional relationship that you can trust and that person will be there for you physically and emotionally in a predictable fashion. But parents have broken it. They've broken it. And now the child is, are my parents really there for me? Can I do something to drive them apart? I may have to take a side in order to keep things okay for me. And I have no place to turn to deal with this. That's why I see parents. That's why I would prepare this father to say, this is what's going to happen. What do you make of it? And if he started getting angry, I said, okay, I hear that you think your ex put her up to that. Just likely, you know, that's what he's going to believe because they don't communicate. And so, yes, but your child's saying this is a need. And I have to define to them something different between a want and a need. Should I define it for you too? I mean, because this is important for the parents to understand. Um, you want a new car, but I don't have the money right now, so I'll keep the old car running for a while. That's something that you want, something that you need. And this is the analogy I use. I say to them, what you need, the analogy cuts in two directions. First, basic needs, air, food, water. Most of the time, we assume that those needs are met. Air all around us, there's water at the tap. Why not buy a burger? So we just take them for granted that those needs are met.
Right,
But what happens if you don't have air for 3 minutes or food for 3 days?
right,
Can you just wait till you can afford it? No. The need intensifies to the point where that's all you can think about is that next drink of water or that next breath of air. And I'm saying that's how emotional needs work. If you don't meet them, they intensify. And this is one of the reasons why actually couples break up because they begin to define their relationship by the intensifying need that's not being met and take for granted the needs that are being met. And I see a lot of people after the divorce and they regret it because, oh, I didn't realize what this person did for me and da, 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 you know, like that. But I'm saying your child has needs and they need to be attended to. And how do you do that? Now I've directed them to a new paradigm. Attended to. How do I attend to my child? Now I need some more loving, right? Loving's, like you said. How do we respond to that, Mr. Such and Such? What do you think your child's really asking you here?
right,
What do they need from you? Not what they want, not what their mom wants,
right.
not what anybody wants. What is this poor little 6-year-old telling you? You know, that can often cut through it, but not preparing the father. Oh, here she goes again. Bam, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, again, how you do this is important.
So I think that one of the things that I would imagine, and I've certainly coached around a lot, is reactivity. And so
Hmm.
like a parent is offended by how the child shows up. Even I had a client who horrible, long, difficult divorce, and her children were kind of like, dad rarely spent time with them, but when he did, and he took them out to some fine
Good,
restaurant,
good time, Dad. Okay. Uh-huh.
and and then they were excited. They were all chatty about, this really nice time they had with dad. But
Yes.
mom's the 24/7. And
Exactly.
so they weren't safe sharing what they did get to enjoy about dad because they came home and mom would be mad at them. So can we just talk about that? And you can understand mom's point, and you could certainly
Absolutely.
understand that the kids need to be able to communicate safely. So whatever the listener's paradigm is that falls within that,
Sure.
how would you address that to our listeners?
Hmm. Okay. That's not an uncommon situation.
Right.
The good time dad, a good time mom, I'm trying to win affection, that's the whole
I
nine
used to
yards of
call
that.
mine Disney dad.
Well, that's as good a term as any, to tell you the truth, Karen. That's a good term. I think I'll adopt that one, actually. I like that one. But I call them good time dads, or, but um, no. The first thing to do is to talk to mom. Let's say the dad's doing this. Uh, Mom, what's it like to hear that? Be a soothing presence for mom, me, as you see. Oh, I hate it. I'm the one who gets all the crap and everything like this, and he gets to, be the good time dad, and they love being with him because they get toys and they get food and they get stuff, and I don't even like the food he gives them because it's all fast food and all the the typical stuff you hear. I said, okay, I hear you. I don't blame you one bit for feeling the way you do, but children are really bad at keeping secrets, and they love both of you. Well, I'm the one they get mad at because I'm the one who has to say, do your homework and stuff. Okay, now let's talk about that. How do you get them to express their displeasure at you making them do things? Because you are the person who needs to do that, you know? And there's the whole litany of how do I communicate with my child? Oh, I don't like it, mom. It's unfair. Dad doesn't make me do it. You make me do it. All this stuff. The mom mirrors back what she hears, right? This is a process that, again, we don't have time to really go into all this, called emptying out. It's different than simply catharsis. And how you set it up is very important for the child to feel safe to do it. If this is only an hour, we're not going to have the time to do that.
Just give us a high level definition of
Uh,
emptying out. We can't go into
okay.
because there's a couple of other things I want to touch on, but I promise to have you back, Dr.
Well,
Marcus.
thank you, Karen. I appreciate that because there's so much here,
I know.
and it's not simple stuff.
Yeah.
You're hitting on a lot of important things, and that's not simple. You know, uh,
So
you
you're
know.
saying here, though, what I'm tracking you saying is for mom, for the more present parent, um, there is a communication that has to happen where the child has to be able to fully and completely empty out, to use your words. So just without going into the how to, because we don't have time,
Well,
what
that's in the book. Actually, I'll plug the book
let's
a
just
little bit.
mention the book. So guys, it's not out yet, but it's called, I think, Parent RX,
Yeah,
and
parent prescription.
Parent Prescription. So Dr. Marcus has this book that's coming out. And give me that 1 or 2 sentence explanation of what the book covers again, and we'll do it again at the end.
The book covers a number of topics, but the main one is how to be a soothing presence for your child, how to develop this a common emotional language and to make it safe. Because the basic equation is like for young children, the more words, the less behavior,
Mm,
you know? So, how do you make that happen?
right.
That's a skill. That's a definite skill that
Yeah.
parents need to learn. And in the book, at different ages in different scenarios,
Yeah.
I'll say parent says, child says, parent says, child says, parents. Because this is what my patients ask me. Dr.
Beautiful.
Marcus, please put this down someplace because I wish I had you in my ear on Thursday night when I needed this. So I do this and I have little notes on each thing saying, this is what you just accomplished.
Yeah,
This
and
is
I think that for people who are going through divorce and then, at the end of my divorce, I think my kids were, maybe 8 and 10. I had a lot of years of
Hmm.
co-parenting in this. And so
Sure.
this sounds like the kind of book that you want to have, you want to be able to pull off the bookshelf and continually reference if you're going to be in a co-parenting relationship with
Yes.
a difficult ex for many years.
There's a whole chapter in the book on high conflict families based on my experience in parent cis Johnson. The thing and loyalty, parent alienation, the things that we've already mentioned. But I don't want to get off topic too far,
Yeah,
you
so
know.
that's the book. I wanted to mention it to our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
It will be Dr. Marcus's email, and the name of the book will be in the show notes, so you guys can
Mm-hmm.
check it and reach out if you want
Mm-hmm.
to. So going back to this, so you
Mm-hmm.
were saying, okay, so mom really needs to give that child a chance to say everything that they want to say.
Now, emptying out is quite a concept here. Okay. It's the opposed to, and this is something we'll have to talk about in depth if we get back together again, Karen, because it's quite a topic. And I'm not going to be able to explain except in its very basic structure.
Yeah.
Being filled up is the opposite of being emptied out. Now, what does it mean to be filled up? This is what I explain to parents as quickly as I can. We all have a space within us, a psychological space, an emotional space. And we always point to our heart when we talk about our emotions, but it's connections in our brain. And this hypothetical space gets filled up. And what fills it up? Intense emotion, anxiety, fear, anger. In fact, in little children, it can be intense glee from their little toy that they got. It's the intensity of the emotion that fills us up. What happens when we get filled up with an intense emotion? It's uncomfortable. We don't like it, you know? Sometimes it makes us feel like we're out of control of our emotions, for instance, and that scares us, you know? And we know when we're filled up. We absolutely know because we have phrases that describe it. I've had it up to here. The straw that broke the camel's back, right? We know it.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when we're filled up? We focus on inwardly on how we feel to try to do something about it, right? We may get it off our chest. We may journal. We may go for a run. We may watch TV and try to distract ourselves. So, by definition, we're focused inwardly. And so, also by definition, we're not focused outwardly, which means we really don't hear what people are saying to us when we're filled up.
Mm.
Best example I can give you, or most graphic example, if you've ever experienced or seen somebody experiencing a rage. Maybe you've heard the phrase a blinding rage. That's true. When somebody is that filled up with anger, they're virtually blind to whatever. You can give the most cogent, calm explanation
I'm not
for
here.
why they shouldn't feel, and they don't hear. No, they hear the 5% that somehow supports their rage, and they get mad, or your tone of voice. And this is where people go, I can't talk to you. You know what I mean? And they don't realize what they're really dealing with. That person really needs to be emptied out before they can even hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so it's
Same
like you
thing.
have a glass filled with water and you're trying to pour more in, but they're not able to receive it.
Nah, they can't take it. They don't hear it.
Right.
And logic fails at this point. Trying to talk somebody out of an emotional perception is moot. You're not going to do it by that. Emptying out. Okay, here's the next thing that we're going to have to discuss. There are 3 levels of emptying out. You don't want me to go into how to do it exactly, but I'm telling you, there are 3 levels of emptying out, and only one of them is obvious. The obvious one, these are my terms, and it's in the book, is the here and now. And I always use a silly example. You didn't take out the garbage. Now we've got plenty of words in the here and now to explain why you should take out the garbage. It smells. It's your job. It's been sitting there for 3 days. Okay, easy. We can all find words for that level. The next deeper level, though, is the history level. This is the 7th time I've asked you to take out the garbage. Now, the reaction is going to be much more intense having to ask somebody the 7th time. But if you didn't know the history and you were looking in from outside, you turn to that person and go, why are you so upset? So you didn't take out the garbage.
Right.
The deepest level, and these again, my terms, tapped into level. The fact that you didn't take out the garbage after I asked you 7 times means you don't listen to me and you don't respect me. I hate that. My father didn't respect me either. This one can go anywhere. And most of the intensity of people's reactions come from the history level and the tapped into level. And half the time they're not even aware of it. But you can empty it out because there are phrases that tell you what level you're on, like history level. You always do that. You never do this. Now they're referring to previous events.
Yep. Yep.
You get it?
Yep.
When you do that, I just want to bust out and blah, blah, blah. Now you're on the tapped into.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you try to go back to level one, but okay, so it's no big deal. I'll take out the garbage now. You miss the point altogether. You see?
Got it. Got it. So I can see where this is. Everyone get this book. This is a great book to get. This is going to be really helpful. I actually have one more question. So
Go for it.
it's a different kind of a problem with children. So another issue that's come up numerous times, amidst whatever the high conflict scenario is children who stop eating or cut. So now rather than a verbal or angry reaction, there's this other behavior. So I would imagine you could probably list a whole bunch of behaviors that come out of this. I don't know how to put a better question in context, so I'm asking about that.
Okay. Children do things like that, but they become, I'm going to do clothes or another one. I'm not going to wear these clothes. I'm insisting on wearing these clothes. Look, you can't wear these. Those are shorts, and it's 30 degrees outside. No, I'm going to wear my shirt. What are the child trying to do? They're trying to take control of a chaotic situation. And this is the only way they know that these very little things are the only things that they can do.
Right.
Is to feel some sense of predictability in their chaotic existence. All right. It's to take control of something that they can take control of. Right. So it's part of a constellation of things.
Yeah.
Parents being unpredictable, kids worrying about parents, are you there for me or not? It gets much deeper than just eating. That typically will go away once the child doesn't feel the need to control anymore, which means, again, the parents need to be able.
Would you say that lying could fall into that category?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's a little different there. The child doesn't feel safe. So they feel, I can't say this, so I'll say this instead. Right. Because I need my parent to be okay. Right. Because I can't be okay unless my parent is. Right. That's the younger children.
And what's so interesting is then it's like, and then the parents try and fix the wrong problem. So it's like, I need to fix my kid's behavior, but the behavior is not the problem. The problem is what's causing the behavior. The behavior is a symptom.
Yeah. Beautiful. The child has a need here. We have to find out what that need is. Yeah. But whatever it is, it needs to be attended to. Yeah. You see what I mean? Now, eating is just a symptom, or not eating is a symptom. Stuffing food down his throat, what are you going to do? Put a tube down his throat? No, you're not going to do that. There's much more going on here. Right. And so, again, parents, I tell parents what I do is I tweak and fine tune their parenting. Yeah. Sometimes I like to tell them, boy, you're messing up, but they're all afraid I'm going to say that. And so I don't say that, but, tweak it based on your children's emotional perceptions of what's going on. Yeah. And my job is to access that and teach you how to access that, because access to emotional perceptions is influence. You want to influence your child, influence these things that they're doing, you need access.
Absolutely. I
have a whole chapter in the book simply entitled, it's the longest chapter in the book, called simply What Gets in the Way. And what gets in the way of emptying out, gets in the way of making it safe, what gets in the way of developing a language, what gets in, you see what I mean? It's quite a do.
And, we all love our children and we want them to emerge unscathed. I would say that that's probably the one thing that every parent says to me when they come to me is, what I'm concerned about is my children getting through this unscathed. And so I'm going to try my best right now to summarize. So in the beginning, what we were talking about is these different stages, and that children, that they feel safe, that they can speak and feel safe, that they can handle their emotions. And at the end of the day, we're talking about developing a language. And part of developing that language, especially with younger children, is maybe using visual aids or toys or books and scaling it 1 to 10, or using your hands And with older children, as you see, let's call it a misbehavior for now. It's not the behavior is the symptom. The cause is absolutely the conflict, because no matter how quiet you are, no matter where or how you think you're hiding the conflict in
Hmm.
the household, we're walking balls of energy. They feel it, they know it, they're being exposed to it, and they're
Yeah.
reacting to it,
And they have nowhere to turn.
and they have no way to turn. And I think what at the end of the day, I think what you're saying is that developing that communication is one of the best things that parents can do, is take care of yourself, notice your own regression, get your own emotional support, and then create healthy communication with your child, where you hear
Yes.
and see them,
Yeah.
where you don't judge them, where you're always looking to find the underlying thing as opposed to just discipline the behavior.
Right.
And if I'm a parent who does all of those things, I develop the communication, I try to get to the root of the problem, I don't bash the other parent, I don't put the child in the middle, then is there anything else that you would add to that list to do your best to help your child through a high conflict situation?
Okay. Let me think for a second. You listed most of what we talked about. You really, really have. That's a good summation. The thing to be aware of, what immediately comes to mind, is the parents absolutely need to learn how to communicate with one another. They absolutely need to do that.
I'm
Um,
gonna I'm gonna challenge you on that. Like, what
okay.
do you do when
They
one
can't.
I mean, I'm
Mm,
18 years divorced, and I will tell you, we had a good relationship on his good days and a bad relationship on his bad days. And so, since
okay.
I have no control over the other person's communication, and I think this is important because I think so many of my audience people will be sitting there thinking, well, that sounds great, but if I'm
Let
the
me
only one
explain.
participating, yeah,
No, you're absolutely right. It was too general a statement. Let me amend it.
thank you.
I mentioned before developing indifference, a benign boundary. If you establish that and you say, we're not talking about emotional this or that, the focus is simply on what the children need.
And then
I
you
may,
stick to it. That's your boundary. You have to stick to it, even if they don't.
how? Exactly. That's why it's called benign, you
Yep.
know? Then you have a chance to be able to communicate just on that level. We are co-parents. And if both parents, or at least one of them, can have access to their child and know the emotional perceptions, they can turn to the other parent and say, Bobby said this about when you guys were going there and it kind of bothered him. Maybe you'd like to talk to him about that.
Mhm.
And the other parent knows how to do it too.
Mhm.
Only though, if there's that benign boundary. You see what I'm saying?
So let me ask you something on something like that. If I had said that to my ex,
Hmm.
he would have ripped the head off of whichever kid told me something and criticized daddy.
Okay. Again, this is
I know it's hard, and I'm bringing it
no,
up.
no, no, no. It's not atypical.
Right.
And I keep going back, and maybe I'm being redundant. So I don't see children without seeing the parents.
Right.
If the dad is like this,
Right.
then I'm typing verbatim. I'm scared of my daddy because of blah blah blah, and this is what happened 2 years ago. And since then, I haven't been able to talk to him. Dad, what do you make of what your child is saying? Not what mom's saying, not what anybody else is saying. I'm reading it to you. Now, the assumption is that even the angry parent cares about his kid. All right. If he doesn't, that's going to come out really quickly anyway. And then it becomes a legal matter and blah, 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 blah. And I go to advocate to the court. Hey, this guy is just, he's out to hurt his kids. You know what I mean? But if he has any sort of, psychological mindedness that gets beyond his anger, all right, then he says, I want what's best for my kid. And I hear what he's saying. What do I do, Dr. Marcus? And that's where I come. This is how you need to establish a safe zone for your child to be able to say these things to you. I tell parents all the time, the idea of coming to see me, Karen, is to get rid of me.
Yeah, I would say to the listeners, if you know that your X is going to react in a certain way when you share something your child's confided in you, that it could work really well, but there are situations where you're going to be setting your kid up to get yelled at by the other
Right.
parent. And I think that we have to be careful about that.
We have to involve the parents in the child's treatment. It's the rule I follow. I mean, other therapists say, I'm just there for the child.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I don't to make it safe for the child. The child is typically a symptom of what's going on. And if you don't change what's going on, okay, if a child is 16, 17, they only have a year left to go, and they're okay, just wait it out. All right.
Right.
You know, you'll be out of there quick enough. But if they're 5 or 6 or 9, and they got, no, something has to change. A lot of times children will start, oh, please don't tell my parents, I'm afraid they're going to get mad at me.
Absolutely.
But by the time we talk about it and say, I hear what you're saying, and you really need your parents to do blah, 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 blah. And I'm seeing your parents already, so they know that, would you want me to tell them about this? And more often than not, say, please, because since I understand them and I'm putting it in words, and I'll even say, look, they may not listen to you, but I'm the guy with the doctor in front of my name. They may listen to me, so, and so.
So would you say to the people listening that if they have young children and what we've been talking about is something that they're struggling with, that let's wrap this up with a call to action. So you're a clinical psychologist who has a depth of experience with children and conflict and divorce. Who is that specialist that me as a co-parent should be looking for to have this kind of work happening in our family?
That's a wonderful question.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound really egocentric here, I'm afraid. All the things that I've been sharing with you are things I've learned over 40 years of dealing with children and being creative in what I do. I learn from the kids and the families.
So you want someone with a depth of experience.
You need somebody who knows what they're doing. I mean, and I can't tell you who's in New York who knows what they're doing.
No. But I think the first thing you're saying is don't get someone 5 years out of school either. Like get someone with some years under their belt and then use your discernment, I think is.
Yeah, and maybe somebody with some advocacy experience too, because one of the things that I do with these families and the lawyers do is put some structure on the chaos.
Yeah.
You see? Now, I know enough just from my own legal experiences to say, hey, this is what you can anticipate here if you keep this up, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I'm right because I've done doing this for a long time. I'm not talking out of my hat. I'm not a lawyer, but this is what I've seen, and the lawyers do the same thing. People don't go through divorce, high conflict divorces every day. They don't know what it's doing and they're chaotic. They need some structure, some steps to take because they're going out of their mind with the uncertainty of the situation.
It has been such a pleasure chatting with you. What a wealth of information and guidance. So appreciate it. Folks, the name of the book is Prescription Parent RX. It's Dr. David S. Marcus. His email is in the show notes along with the name of the book. We don't have a URL for you yet, so please email him. He'll put you on his list. He'll let you know as soon as it's ready for pre-sale and you can grab a copy. And it sounds like many of you would be well served in investing in a copy. Dr. Marcus, I would love to have you back again. I think that we've got about another 20 conversations to have. So we'll have you back. And for you folks, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back again real soon with another episode of High Conflict Divorce Demystified. Until then, you take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to our podcast, Getting Educated, Regulating Your Emotional Reactions, and it's been really helpful. Yet you could do better, be better, and you're wanting and needing more support. That's where our coaching service is a game changer. We're here for you when you need us the most, ensuring you have all the tools and resources at your fingertips, guiding and supporting you to be more effective. Our free rapid relief call helps you gain a broader perspective, commit to your best next steps, and determine what coaching support is right for you. Visit rapidreliefcall.com to book your call today. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.